The expectation is that Penn State will reset those same NCAA records that they broke a season ago, and this is how they'll do it.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State Wrestling. Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show, and I am joined by a first-time guest, but a very special guest in Nate Cobler, Penn State beat reporter for Center Daily Times. He's been on the beat for 9 years, and we got a lot of topics to debate. How Penn State can and will break some of these NCAA records. Well, that's the expectation, right? That they'll reset these NCAA records that they set a season ago. And then what questions remain about a team that has that expectation? And then moving out of Rec Hall, that's coming up in the final segment. Nate, let's begin with the postseason outlook. And I know I'm skipping past the Big Ten tournament, but the NCAA tournament has more at stake, obviously, with what they can do in terms of individual champions, individual finalists, getting back to that 172.5 point mark, getting to the 100-point margin. I mean, these are some lofty goals that this Penn State team is set up to do once again. I mean, I think they have 8 legitimate national title contenders out of the 10 weight classes.
Yeah, I mean, the way you look at it right now with how the intermat rankings are, yeah, you're right. You got 8 guys that are ranked in the top 2 of their weight classes. All 8 of those guys have very, very well good chances of being in those NCAA finals, come March 23rd or March 22nd there in Philly. So it's a sight to behold, and it's going to be painful, I guess, for us reporters to have to write a bunch of that if that occurs. But, it's something that would be special, that people haven't seen ever, but to be able to witness it and, you're not even talking about, you're kind of putting on the back burner of what Carter Starachi could even do that night as well, should everything follow through. It's just kind of rather insane to think about how just talented this lineup is, and bulk of it is returning next year with fillers to come back in. So it's going to be a sight to behold, come Philly here in, very much less than a month now.
I mean, that's a conversation in itself that, this isn't just another unprecedented lineup, or this isn't the unprecedented lineup. No, Penn State could do this for another year, maybe even 2 more years because of that nucleus of Tyler Casack, Shane Van Ness. Levi Haynes has 1 more year, but I think of Mitchell Messenbrink, Van Ness, Casack, Luke Lilledahl as well, who we're going to talk about a little more because there are concerns about based on where he would seed, and Braeden Davis at those lighter weights. And of course, Josh Barr is coming back too. But that's what I mean is that 8 national title contenders a season ago, they had 6 finalists and they ultimately had 4 individual champions. So that's going to have a lot of effect, obviously, on your points, but also the scoring. Yep. Penn State is just so offensively sound, and I know that's what Oklahoma State is starting to emphasize a lot more under David Taylor. Iowa's emphasizing it as well, but Penn State has just taken the bar to a new level. So for Penn State, they not only rack up the bonus points, but they're going to have close to... I don't necessarily want to make a prediction here per se because anything can happen with the Big Ten tournament. Mm-hmm. Anything can change with the seeding, but this is based off of where the intermat rankings sit now, Nate, as you've mentioned, in the fact that there's just a lot of guys that are ranked 1 or 2 that project at the moment to get to the finals as it is.
Yeah, and I mean, you obviously we have to factor in all the other conferences and stuff too that come into play, right? But the Big Ten is the top and the cream of the crop when it comes to it. So, you can kind of compare it to the SEC in football, right? You have all these teams that are, phenomenal and they're beating the tar out of each other. But Penn State, when it comes to the wrestling aspect of it, is they're just beating everybody in the conference, and it doesn't matter what they're ranked at or, what they are, because we saw what they did against Iowa in the BJC when they were number 2 at that time, and they won by 30. So, it's just crazy to think of, what that they're accomplishing and what they're doing because, like we said, a bulk of these guys are going to be back. And, who's to say that this doesn't occur, for the next several years? Because, I always like to say Penn State doesn't rebuild like other teams do. They just reload. So, to see how that comes to fruition and just how that's going to continue to flourish until Kale and them decide they're going to hang up their own wrestling shoes as far as the coaching career goes. It's just going to continue to go that way. But it's just it's just crazy to think that, everybody was so enthralled with them having 5 national champions in St. Louis back in 2017, and then they did it again in 21, and then now here they are, the possibility of having 8 finalists. That would just put the team race out of control and probably done by Friday night as opposed to Saturday morning where Penn State's been clinching it. So it's just to even think about the future. Like you said, you hate to step over the Big Ten tournament, but the excitement that will be there is really not going to be there because Penn State's just going to go through and just blow through it like they've done. And it's going to be even worse this year. Then you get into the NCAA tournament where you're getting all these other conferences in and stuff. But still, if Penn State has, we'll just say 7. We'll say 7 Big Ten champs. I mean, you're looking at 7 number 1 seeds right off the get-go. So, it's just amazing to think and see what's going to occur here over the next couple weeks.
And it's not a guarantee to say that they are going to get 8 national finalists. Okay, we're talking about finalists here because Penn State had 6 and they went 4-2. Yep. Getting more than that 6 finalist margin will reset the record. Okay, yep. So it's actually a simple goal. If you get 7 and Penn State happens to go 4-3, yep. They get 4 individual champions, then that most likely will reset the record, and then that points margin too. Mm-hmm. I think what's interesting is can you have an even larger points margin than you did a season ago? Because 100 was crazy to think, but now, okay, Oklahoma State has resurfaced. And I think Ohio State just has a little bit of potential to go on. I think they're a good tournament team. Maybe not necessarily as strong of a dual meet team, but they're certainly a team that has underlying potential to make some noise in the tournament between Jesse Mendez and maybe even a Nick Feldman makes some noise in the heavyweight class. I know Gable Stevenson's there. But for Penn State, they just need to get 7 finalists and go 4-3, and then that breaks the scoring points record. You get the finalists record of 7 in an NCAA championships, but it's going to be very difficult to break that 5 individual championship mark, which Penn State has with Iowa, with itself. So getting 6 individual champions is going to be, I think that's the one that everyone needs to have circled, because all of this is kind of explanatory, but 6 individual champions or more, that's crazy.
Yeah, and you talk about 7 finalists, right? Well, you can go from the back half of that lineup, 165 through 285, and guess what? You've got 5 right off the bat. And now, granted, barring injuries, whatever, but those 5 guys, that's what the thing with Penn State was this year. It wouldn't have mattered how many they would have lost in the first 5, because that last 5, they're consistent, and it didn't matter what you'd been behind by at the break. They would have come through and just would have done what they continue to do all year, which is score bonus points, like Mitchell Messenbrake, 15 tech falls out of his 18, 19 wins now this year. You got Carter Starace, who's obviously he's wanting to try to win a Hodge. That's one of the things he hasn't done yet. You got Levi, who's just turned into a much larger Zane Rutherford, putting guys in these bow and arrows and just touching their feet to their head. So, you could pretty much say, barring any injuries, from 165 up to 285, you could have those 5 finalists. Josh Barr, he's new on the scene. You don't know how he's going to react. You'll be a nice test for him at the Big Ten championships to kind of see how he reacts to a tournament setting, things like that. He's wrestled in open tournaments, but that's open tournaments that aren't on these big stages. So, you look at that, you have those guys. You look at a guy like Bo Bartlett, looked phenomenal against Mendez in the dual match. Mm-hmm. And then to finish out the rest of the year, we saw a different Bo Bartlett than what we've seen previously. He joked with us in that American match afterwards. He said about he don't think he's ever taken more than 1 shot in a wrestling match. And then he goes out and, racks off 6 takedowns in the first period. So I think now is where the point is with him. He's now at the point like, hey, what more can I do? And that's just win a national championship, because he was in the finals last year and he lost, and he knows how he lost. So I think for him, he's motivated to get that first title. It'll be his only title, but still to get his first title. So you have a guy like that that'll be in the finals, look to be in the finals. Shane Van Ness, just phenomenal in his return from missing a whole year with the whole injury that he had to deal with last year and things like that. Kasak, again, a guy like him last year lost his very first match at the NCAA championships, rattled off 7 straight to come back and finish third, which has only been done like by 9 people in the NCAA history. So these guys have that taste. They have that feel. They know what they need to do. So like I said, those top 5, you're going to have 5 probably right there. It's going to be a matter of where can they get these other 2, and they've got 3 good ones that could get 2 out of the 3.
So let's address those questions. You mentioned Josh Barr. How will he do being a first-time full starter? Well, same goes for Luke Lilledahl. Questions at 133 because Braeden Davis isn't 100%. And then will Penn State rack up enough bonus points? I've seen questions about just offensively how sound they are going into this postseason. We'll discuss that more after the break. And today's show is brought to you by Roy. Attention Nittany Lion fans, the future of college sports is here, and it's transparent. Before the Roy app, NIL negotiations often happened under the table, and fans didn't have a clear way to directly support the athletes that they care about. Now with Roy, you get to be part of the change and support Penn State and other athletes in the most transparent way possible. Roy, the NIL app, allows you to choose the player that you want to support, decide how much to contribute, and you'll receive exclusive content from the athletes that you're backing. And here's the transparency. If your player transfers, you will get your money back. It's a risk-free way of showing your support with the Roy app. The Roy app gives fans control. No more uncertainty. Now you can provide transparent, impactful support and help shape the team and the future of college sports with your contributions. Download the Roy app now from the App Store and start backing Penn State or your favorite athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and a real impact. This is the future of college sports. Join it now by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. 125 and 133 are the outliers, but I think Luke Lilledahl has a lot of potential. We'll address Braeden Davis's injury concerns here. And if we can, I think Josh Barr is just as much of a national title contender as Jacob Cardenas is, as AJ Ferrari is, as Stephen Buchanan. I'd argue that Barr is, yes, because he beat Cardenas. I'd say he's even in a better spot than AJ Ferrari is right now. I really think it's Stephen Buchanan or Josh Barr at 97, but we'll address all of that, including just how offensively elite this team is. I think this team's better offensively, collectively. A season ago, obviously, the team that set records was just as much as well. But when you go through the lineup and do a compare and contrast, I think Luke Lilledahl at 125 is better than what Braeden Davis was a season ago. Braeden Davis this season, even if he's not 100%, I would argue is that he is better at 133 this season than Aaron Nagel was a season ago. And then at 184, you had Bernie Truax. Bernie Truax did make the podium, but he wasn't this elite. He could score at will. Now, he was very talented, and I don't mean to discredit him like that, but when you compare him to Carter Starace, you can tech fall just about anybody. You can guarantee a win every single time. We're expecting him to get that 5th NCAA championship. So to make the argument or to question that this team won't rack up the bonus points to get close to that scoring title, that scoring record and reset it again, I think is nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, that's what people kind of say. They're like, well, why can't they win their conference tournament by such a large margin, but then they can get into the national championships and the NCAA championships and they can win by 100 points, right? And a lot of it comes down to, when it comes to the conference championships, a lot of Penn State's guys getting buys in the first rounds because they're either the 1 or the 2 seed, and so they're already into the quarterfinals or whatever, the second round, and so they don't have that scoring opportunity or potential as all these other conference schools do. So that's where that shrinks that scoring margin and that margin of victory, because they aren't getting the same amount of opportunities as what all these other schools are. Now, when you get into the NCAA championships, everybody's kind of a fresh start, so to speak, because there was one pigtail match, which is the 33 versus 32 seed.
Yep, there's 32 contestants here.
Exactly. So then it's a matter of pulling that guy in, and everybody's on a level playing field at that point. Because let's face it, it's not very often you see a 33 or 32 seed making their way through and being able to rock out and knock out the number 1 seed. So I think that's where people are like, well, why can't they do this? Why can't they? Well, you got to look at you got to look at the whole picture. Mm-hmm. You got 14 teams in the conference compared to however many schools there are Division I wrestling now.
Right.
So it's just a matter of the ability and the opportunity to be able to have those chances to be able to score those bonus points. Yeah, you'll see Penn State guys. Well, they'll go through and they'll maybe tech or they'll pin guys, even major their way to probably the quarterfinals. Sometimes when they're in the quarterfinals, they're hitting and they're getting a tech fall or they're getting a pin into the semifinals. And even sometimes you see it, they're doing it in the semifinals too. So it's just crazy that, people might question, well, how can they not, how can they, they can't do that again. Well, yeah, they really can with a guy like Mitchell Messenbrink, who's 100% scoring bonus. Carter Starachi, who's almost darn near 100% scoring bonus. So again, we can sit here and we can talk about it, and then we can put it into play and put perspectives. And it's like when you actually see it in person, that's when it's like, wow, holy crap, this really did happen.
And when you go through the lineup, Josh Barr is an offensive wrestler. Mm-hmm. Greg Kirkfleet's an offensive wrestler. Carter Starachi's an offensive wrestler. Levi Haynes, his defense is better, but he can still get a tech fault. They can score at will, my point is. Luke Lilledahl can score at will. Now, Braeden Davis, depending on the competition, can't necessarily do that, but we've seen Luke Lilledahl has, 9 tech falls as a true freshman, so he can score at will. Bo Bartlett, when he wants to take more shots, can score at will. Shane Van Ness, same thing. I know that Mitchell Messenbrink is this outlier of, it's just the name of the game for him. It's offense, it's offense, it's offense, it's motor, go, go, go. I mean, to an extent, Josh Barr's kind of like that too in terms of the gas tank. He just bides his time. He's just a little more patient. But aside from Braeden Davis, I think all of these wrestlers, regardless of the competition, can go out and get double digits on the scoreboard against just about any opponent.
Yeah, and when you talk about the lineup and the question marks of, they're going to probably get all 10 guys to the NCAA championships, right? So yeah, it's only been, I want to say maybe once or twice that all 10 have been All-Americans under Kale. So you factor in that aspect. So now the question would be, okay, where's the spot where somebody might not become an All-American, right? Who's not going to finish top 8? Mm-hmm. Well, from 41 back, you're talking top 8 to give it.
Easily.
Let's face it. Easily. Now you're talking with Lilledahl and Davis. It's Davis with the injury concerns. Davis with, okay, I was the number 1 seed last year and I didn't do so hot. So, does that creep back into his mind? Because now he's back on the stage again. With Lilledahl, it's, hey, I'm a true freshman, but I've done all this stuff and I've have world titles and
I know, really
Olympic trial placements and, go this, that, and another thing. And it's like, how does that factor in? Does the youth show on that big stage, even though he's been on that big stage before, just in a totally different, you're talking about freestyle wrestling compared to folk style wrestling.
Right.
So it's just a matter of how will those things go? Will those two guys get in their heads?
Yeah, it's the inexperience, and that's why I think when you bring up Josh Barr, it's a good point. But when he goes out and defeats a Jacob Cardenas the way that he did early on against Lehigh, I mean, Michael Beard, to go out there and get a major decision, and then his own teammates, Lucas Cochran, Connor Mirasola, right? So the proof is there, but for Luke Lilledahl, Braeden Davis, I know that Braeden Davis has improved, and I know that he's not 100%, but for him to go out, let's be conservative and say let's 75%, 80% with the leg injury. He's defeating Nasir Bailey and Nick Bazakis. And he's not 100%, yet he's defeating All-America level competition. Dylan Shaver, and when he's not at full conditioning either. So you could take that percentage back even a little bit. So I think Davis at 100% is a finals contender. Is he the favorite? Absolutely not, because Lucas Bird, Drake Ayala, the jury's still out on Ryan Crookham. I hope he wrestles just for the sake of the competition. I hope he's able to compete. But Braeden Davis, I think, is in that top 5. And if he was 100%, could really get to the semifinals, but we'll see. It depends on matchup. It depends on seeding. For Luke Lilledahl, I think he has the potential to go on a Tyler Casack run, because the same chatter happened last season, Nate, where Tyler Casack, he's a freshman, he has all the potential in the world, but it's just not right now. Well, this is when it happens. This is when you break onto the scene. The younger wrestlers, younger competitors, it doesn't matter the sport, football, basketball, baseball, wrestling, whatever you name it. If there's an athlete with all the potential in the world, they get better as the season progresses. So Luke Lilledahl's better wrestling is only ahead of him. So depending on matchup, depending on seeding, I think Luke Lilledahl can absolutely get to the national semifinal. And then what? But if he wrestles a Matt Ramos or a Richie Figueroa early on, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think, he was talking about back to Davis. Yeah, he was number one seed as a true freshman in his first national championships. Well, now this year, like you're saying, he might not be 100%. However, he might be like a 4, 5 seed, maybe something like that, where he could come through and break up. You talk about bracket busters in NCAA basketball. You could see Braeden Davis maybe come through and start breaking up brackets in the 133, depending on however low he gets seeded or whatever with the NCAAs. Just like with Carter last year, they stuck him as a 9 seed, and dude goes in and just obviously blows everything up. Because it's Carter Starachi, and that's just what he does. He goes out and just beats people. So, you could see where there might not be as much pressure on Davis that allows him to wrestle freer. That's then he'll then be able to push his way through and make his way through, like you're saying, in the semifinals. And hey, anything can happen once you get to the semifinals, because now you're only one away from the finals and one more away from the title. So
postseason expectations are high. I don't mean to overlook the Big Ten tournament, but everybody's really concerned about the NCAA postseason because there is another historical precedent that can be set by Penn State, and Cale Sanderson just continued. I don't think he's going to stop 8 finalists. Then it becomes, 9 finalists, 10 finalists, right? 10 individual champions. I think that's the goal at the end of the day for Cale Sanderson and company, because it's to a point where the glass ceiling's broken. You can't get anything better than 10 finalists and, of course, 10 individual champions. But that's impossible, right? That can't be done.
I mean, it's crazy to think about. It's possible it could be done, but, man, you got to have everything kind of fall into line. You could have – if you had all your guys be number 1 seeds or even number 2 seeds for that matter – that's fine. But now you got there's outside factors like injuries. You got outside factors like, making weight. Like that's the thing. That's like a legitimate thing. Like you can not make weight, and then you're out. There's nothing you can do about it. So you have a couple of these outside factors, right, that can play into that. But you got to be darn near perfect if you're going to get 10 national champions. And then even then it's like, just imagine what the record, the points scored would be. Even let's say you don't even get any bonus points, like just the placement points alone and everything else. It's just crazy to think.
And I'm not trying to elude the fact that that's what I'm saying, that this is going to happen this time around. But I think that's when Cale can sit back and rest. That all will be accomplished when that happens, because there's nothing more. What else can you do? If you go 10 out of 10, you can't go 11 out of 10, right? So Penn State, I think that's what Cale Sanderson just continued, like you said, show up and fight and let the results speak for themselves. So Penn State, just an interesting debate at the end of the season here, end of the regular season, that I want to continue just to discuss. Penn State wrestles American University, someone way beneath their caliber. And Iowa goes out and schedules a non-conference opponent, a top 3 matchup against Oklahoma State. In order for Penn State to do something like that, they would have to move out of Rec Hall. We'll talk about it more here, coming up on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's show is also brought to you by Fabric by Gerber Life. Life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take their first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is so important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that will fit your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online, right from your couch. You could be covered in under 10 minutes, and in many cases with no health exam required. That gives you peace of mind. As a parent, you want to make sure that your family is financially protected no matter what happens, and Fabric will give you that peace of mind. And it's affordable coverage. You can get millions of dollars in coverage for less than $1 a day. So protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. And it goes beyond life insurance. Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That is meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. MEET fabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company, not available in certain states. Price is subject to underwriting and health questions. A little bit controversial if you're a Penn State wrestling purist. You want this team to stay in Rec Hall, whereas the Bryce Jordan Center is meant for those spectacular events. You schedule Iowa, you schedule Ohio State, Michigan, right? They're just the teams that are the best of the best in the Big Ten Conference, and you make it that special event that everybody can circle once or twice on the schedule. Wyoming an exception because Penn State women's volleyball had Rec Hall taken up because of their national championship run. I digress from that, but you realistically speaking, you would have to move Penn State wrestling out of Rec Hall for the sake of this conversation if you want them to do those things that Iowa is doing. Iowa has Carver Hawkeye Arena dedicated to them, and that's a larger arena. If you're, Nate, I've already made the point that if you're going to schedule the likes of Oklahoma State or Northern Iowa, you're not going to put that in Rec Hall. You're going to try to make it a point to Oklahoma State could very well be in Beaver Stadium. That's a separate conversation. But if you're going to schedule, my point is, if you're going to schedule a non-conference opponent that is top 5, top 10 caliber, somebody that you don't routinely face if you're Penn State, you're not going to do that in front of 2,000 to 3,000 fans. You're going to do it in the Bryce Jordan Center with 18,000 to 20,000 people in attendance because that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. So, a couple of years ago, when they first had like 2 BJC duels, it was like we were questioning as the media side of it. We were like, well, why don't you guys do this more often type thing? And, if I can remember correctly, they actually lose money. The wrestling team actually loses money by having stuff in the BJC because they have to
rent it.
Because they have to rent the BJC. So, when it comes to that and, you have that aspect, right? And when we all see what's going on with Olympic sports and with the NIL stuff and, things like that. Olympic sports are really kind of starting to get cut because of funding issues. Cleveland State, for example, they were just getting ready to, kind of defund the wrestling program there because of funding issues and, all this other fun stuff. So, it's a matter of, like you're saying, okay, yeah, you're going to get these big time opponents who you're going to want to have in the BJC. A couple years ago when they had the national dual championships, Penn State wrestled Oklahoma State inside Rec Hall. It was phenomenal. It was packed. But if it was in the Bryce Jordan Center, you're talking double the people that was there for that, even almost triple. So, when you have those types of matchups, yes, you want to have those in Rec Hall or you want to have those in the BJC, but you also would like to kind of maybe have them in Rec Hall just because of the atmosphere of the people right on top of the mat, because let's face it, that's obviously a home field advantage. When you have that amount of people just staring down on you, you don't know what to think. So when you have to kind of touch on, yes, they're wrestling American, they've closed out seasons with a Clarion, schools like that, really what Kale and them look at as that aspect is, okay, yeah, hey, look, is it a cupcake? Sure, it's a cupcake, but it's allowing those schools that don't get as much attention, some attention that they can deserve and get because, hey, yeah, they're not as large as Penn State, but they're still a Division I program any way you look at it. So it's just a matter of, I think they want to help like Kale and them, they want to help the little guys out too, because let's face it, Olympics was darn near cut from the Olympics several years ago. And now it's like, is it on the cusp of that again? And so the only way to do that is kind of to keep everybody involved, kind of keep the sport growing. And the only way you can do that is by showing the little guys as well as the big guys.
Penn State isn't dodging competition when they schedule, like you said, the smaller school, the lesser recognized program. Penn State wrestles in the Big Ten Conference, and Cale Sanderson has made that a point. We already have great wrestling. What's the point of the national duels? Because we have all these other tournaments, but why go around and chase after programs to try to schedule all these high-profile matchups when the Big Ten Conference does all the work for us? Top 5, Nebraska. Top 10, Ohio State. The number 2 team in the country in the Iowa Hawkeyes. Penn State doesn't have anything left to prove. But so all of these scheduling issues or the debate around the schedule simply has to do with logistics. Just because I like the Bryce Jordan Center atmosphere, I like the crowd. I think there's power in quantity. I am for, or let me say this, I am not against Penn State wrestling moving to the Bryce Jordan Center full time in the way that Iowa wrestling has Carver Hawkeye Arena. I think eventually, yes, it is expensive to rent the Bryce Jordan Center, but I think over time, eventually, you add up the ticket sales, you add up the parking, just logistically, you got to figure all of that out, because then you cut into the basketball schedules, right? Men's and women's basketball. There are other programs, there are other events, there are other causes, right? Thon was just in the Bryce Jordan Center. So you really have to figure out, okay, how can we allow Penn State wrestling to utilize the Bryce Jordan Center to the best of its ability, not, hammer it with costs, and while at the same time having it so everybody can share it and there aren't any logistical issues.
Yeah, and you didn't even factor in the idea of concerts.
Yeah,
or
that's kind of what I was alluding to, right? Just other events. Yeah. Period. It's not just basketball.
Right. And I mean, like, I kind of made a joke, like, when their match with Michigan, because Michigan was down this year. Michigan was very down this year. And they had that as a BJC doll, of course. But, like, I made a joke. It wasn't full like it was for Iowa. It wasn't full like it has been for previous BJC dolls. And I kind of made a joke. I was like, oh, this must be what it feels like when you're in here for watching a basketball game. Because let's face it, I don't
even know about that. I think wrestling had a better crowd than a prime basketball game. That's what it is right now. That's what it is.
Right, because they're the only team outside of women's volleyball with what they did this year. They're the only team winning national titles. I mean, football got close this year. Like I said, women's volleyball did what they did. They went through and they won a title. But who's been winning all the national titles at Penn State? It's been wrestling. So, and again, don't see how it's going to change with Kale and the staff there outside of, other schools going and using this NIL money and buying a lineup, so to speak. But even then, it's like it doesn't get you very far, because, like, Michigan – they tried that last year and it didn't get them very far. I think they finished top 4, top 5. Mm-hmm. So, it's just a matter of getting the people that want to be there and getting those wrestlers that want to be there. And that's what Penn State's doing. They're getting the guys that want to be there first. And then they're going and getting these diamonds in the rough. A guy like I just kind of always go back to, Terrell Barraclaw, who wasn't a Penn State starter. He spot started here and there. It was phenomenal. He was always coming through, getting big wins for Penn State. Goes to Utah Valley for his graduate year, and here he is sitting top 3 in the country. And the guy sat at Penn State. It's just crazy.
I hope it's him and Mitchell Messenbrink at 165 in the championship. It depends on seeding, right? Depends on seeding. But if he's the second I think Caliendo will be the 2 seed. But if Barraclaw is the 3 seed, then he absolutely, and then he would have to get through Caliendo to get to Mitchell Messenbrink. So, Nate, but I think that's an excellent point about the way that Penn State, continues to win championships. Why they do that? Because they don't chase after anybody. If it's not a natural fit, they're not worried about it. They want the wrestlers that they want, and then the wrestlers want to be there. I think Mike Tomlin says volunteers, not hostages. And I know that, Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't winning NFL championships routinely, but it kind of goes with the same thing here for Cale Sanderson, is that we want it to be a natural fit and not force anybody out of their comfort zone. So, Nate, do you think they're going to change anything? We'll finish up with this. Do you think they're going to change anything with the dynamic between Rec Hall and the Bryce Jordan Center? Because I don't think they're going to get a sellout every single time at the Bryce Jordan Center, but the money you can make on parking, concessions, you're still going to get at least 10,000 plus, even against an American university. I mean, Pennsylvania is just the mecca for the sport. So with that being said, I do think it's worth considering at some point in time. If you want to grow the sport, you need the best program in the country, and the best that's been the best is the best and will continue to be the best in front of tens of thousands of people rather than just a couple or a few.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I honestly don't see that they're going to make any changes, just because Cale and the staff like Rec Hall, because they like that closeness. They like that on top of you type.
I get it. I do.
And, they use, they allude to it all the time, how the BJC gives the guys a good feel for what it'd be like for the national tournament, because it's an elevated stage and the mat's right there in the middle. And then you got all the pyrotechnics and you got, all the, the smoke and everything else. So I think they just love the close-knitness of Rec Hall, that they don't want to go away from that. B, again, the money comes into play. And I believe C is, yes, like you said, hey, you can get 10,000 people in for an American Dole. You can get 10 to 12,000 in for, an Illinois Dole or a Wisconsin Dole. But they want to continue to have those sellouts. They want to continue to have 16,000 sets of eyes on them, for those types of events, because that's maximizing their potential of profitability, but also it's also maximizing the amount of eyes too. So it's like, okay, you go to Rec Hall, you can have 6,000. You go to BJC, you have 6,000. That ain't gonna look too good, whether it be on television or not. So I think it's just a matter of the closeness that they like, and like I said, money. I think money obviously does everything nowadays.
That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. A great conversation and a debate around Penn State wrestling, and more than just, hey, what's going on the mat. He is Nate Cobler of the Center Daily Times, Penn State wrestling beat reporter. Has been doing it for 9 years. Links to his work will be down in the description. Nate, I thought it was a fantastic conversation and can't wait to have you back on the show when you are able to join.
Sounds good, buddy. Thanks for having me.
And again, thanks so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. If you're new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast to keep up with Penn State wrestling. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section about what you think of Penn State's chances to break these NCAA records again, or the debate around Rec Hall and the Bryce Jordan Center. Really appreciate your thoughts. Please leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family. Again, thank you for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. Craig puts the Big Ten first when everybody else overlooks it. He covers all 18 teams in depth, including Penn State. You can find Locked On Big Ten available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day.